Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Stephen, here with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. So this week we are going to be reading Parashat Nitzvim, which is the 51st Torah reading of the year. We're getting real close to the end of the year. Personally, I'm very excited. I love the fall. Technically, fall doesn't start to the end of September, but in my mind, fall starts with the high holidays. And we've had Selichot, and we are on the verge of the new month of Tishrei and the new year, Rosh Hashanah, which we will be celebrating, and I use the right word, celebrating in our synagogue, um, Monday evening of the 6th, and Tuesday and Wednesday, the 7th and 8th. Hope to see many of you there. Yes, we unfortunately still have some COVID restrictions, but we will be broadcasting on Zoom and on Facebook. And I will say to you, this should be very interesting because thanks to Alan and Bonnie, we have some new equipment. We have a camera that can swivel, that can zoom. It's very, very exciting. So looking forward to seeing you there. Uh, I also have to mention the last couple of weeks of our study. We have been doing our usual Tuesday night Torah study. And on Thursday, I've been leading a special Judaic studies that have focused on some topics that we usually don't cover because they're kind of, well, for lack of a better phrase, out there, as my granddaughter likes to say. It's a lot of the metaphysical things, a lot of the occult things. The first week, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about free will, hit on astrology a little bit. Somebody mentioned occult. And then the following week, we started talking about reincarnation and good and bad, why some people die early, some people don't. And it was a very lively conversation. And in my mind, this is something that's really kind of been missing from Judaism because I think that during the Middle Ages, we got wrapped up in a lot of halacha, a lot of dogma, things to do, things to not do. I have been reading the Shulchan Aruch, which is a book that lists all the laws that we follow. And yes, it's 2 volumes, and yes, it's over 1,000 pages, culled from the Torah, culled from the Talmud. The laws about what you do and what you don't do on Shabbat is mind-boggling. Shabbat is supposed to be a day of rest. And with all the various laws that you have to consider about not doing certain things, it almost takes the fun out of Shabbat. So I'm not going to go into them. That's for another time. But you get into a lot of people are coming to our synagogue. They want the spiritual aspects of Judaism. They want a religion. They're attracted to a religion that's fair, that really respects people, that doesn't just impose laws just because, doesn't, demean women. It's a very commonsensically fair system. And that's what people want, but they also want the spiritual implications of it as well, which I'm happy to discuss anytime. I think it's awesome. So that being the case, and I know I've gone on a little bit more. Nitzavim's a short. It's a short parsha, folks. It's like 3 pages. It's like 2 chapters. That's it, with maybe 25 verses in each chapter. It's very quick because this is the last day of Moses' life. It's his swan song, his farewell message as he goes out and beyond. Now, let me introduce something here that we're going to talk about next week in next week's portion. But Moses does not die. Moses is an enlightened prophet. His soul is whisked from his body as the sages say, you would pluck a hair out of a glass of milk. So in a way, we all lament the fact that Moses doesn't get to see the promised land, but he has evolved spiritually to something a lot more. It almost seems kind of trivial. But Moses is addressing all the people, and he says, I address all of you, and he names everybody, the men, the women, the children, the hewers of stone, the craftsmen, some people who were not Jews but were allowed to remain, with the children of Israel just because they wanted to be there, right? And they're observing the 7 Noachic codified laws. And he says, this is for you who are here, and this is for you who are not here. So, on one hand, he's making a covenant with our ancestors that were there for all of us, as yet unborn at the time, or maybe we were all there in one form or another, or maybe where we were there in another incarnation. That's another thing we talked about Thursday night about reincarnation. So maybe we were there in a former life, a former body. Who knows? But the point is that the covenant affects all of us. And he says, folks, stick to Torah. Don't think that, well, I'm blessed and I'm great and I can do whatever I want. And then you go off and you start to indulge and, have a little fun with some of the idolatrous religions, some of the pagan practices, that were at that time and maybe even now, right? Because we believe in monotheism and some folks think that we're the only religion that does. I'll leave it up to you. But do not think that you are above the law. Don't think that you can indulge in pagan practices and still commit to Torah. You can't, and you will find out the hard way. Now, this is in response to the Tochacha, because the people were, and we discussed this in our Torah study, people were freaked out, lack of a better term, about the Tochacha, the fact that you had, maybe the 14 blessings, 14 verses of blessings, and then you had like 40 some odd verses of what's going to happen if you don't honor the covenant, if you don't stick to Torah, right? And people were scared. They were freaking out like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. Well, it's kind of meant to sound horrible. It really is, to scare you into staying with Torah. And by the way, this isn't, the being ruled by the iron hand, by the iron fist. This is doing what's right because it's the best way to live your life. And let's not lose sight of that. Setting up a court that doesn't look at who or what you are, but just looks at the case. Doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor, what religion you're from, right? Or what culture you might be, what heritage. Everybody gets treated the same. You're a king, you're a peasant, doesn't matter, okay? You live by those laws and society works. If you don't, there is mistrust. People are not want to do business on a free basis because they think they're going to be cheated. You're going to have different set of weights for him, different set for me. You're going to cheat one of us. These laws are designed for everybody to get a fair shake. What do we have going on in the country today? And I don't mean to delve into politics, but there's a lot of people, and this has been going on forever, ever since we've had governments. People like, oh, the government controls us. You have all this discontent, and you're going to have that in a society. Let's face it, there's always going to be people that are not happy. But the point of this is that no one can say, this is so that no one can say, well, you favored someone else, so I'm not going to stick to your laws. No, we need to stick to the laws because the laws are designed to give everybody a fair break. And when they don't, we need teshuvah. We need to go back to those laws. This is why we study Torah. And this is what Moses is telling his people. Not in so many words, but he's saying that the Torah is there. Choose Torah, choose life. This is your life and the length of his days. That verse, that phrase is in this particular portion. So we have to be very careful, and we have to stick, we have to cleave to Torah. Now, we don't want to do so just because out of dogma. What do we do as Jews? We question, we analyze, we say, well, what exactly does this mean? That's a good thing, right? We've got the written law, which is the Torah, and we have the oral law, which is all the encompassing issues, the encompassing laws, the encompassing procedures that allow us to honor the covenant in the proper way. Most obvious example, of course, is kashrut. How do you slaughter an animal? How long do you wait between eating meat and then eating dairy? Things like that. It's questions like that help us live life. Now, some people say, well, what does that have to do with business? because it reminds you. And again, it's a hook, it's a decree. You just do it because God said. But in a way, it's a reminder that you're living a righteous life. Is there a reason why we eat specific things and don't eat other things? Yes, there is. Do we know what the reason is? Not really, and we can certainly conjecture. But the point is, we do it because it goes along with all the other things. My thinking is that it's a reminder, just like tzitzit, a reminder, just like zuzot, a reminder, just like praying 3 times a day to remind yourself. And speaking of praying 3 times a day and reminding ourselves, we're going to in a week or so, we're going to all be together. It's going to be wonderful. Cantor John Guest is going to be joining us, and we're going to make it as wonderful an experience for you as possible. So please join us. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Shabbat Shalom, and in advance, may you all be inscribed in the book of life, and we'll be repeating this often.